Hey everybody, it's Corbett Barr from Think Traffic, and I am honored today to be talking with one of my favorite bloggers in the world. And I don't know if this guy, Chris Guillebeau, needs much of an introduction on Think Traffic. I think most people are probably familiar with him, but just in case you aren't familiar with Chris, he blogs over at the Art of Non-Conformity. He is a published author a couple of times over, actually, and we'll be talking about his newest book in just a second. And he's also the founder of my favorite conference ever called the World Domination Summit, which is coming up again this summer. Unfortunately, it's sold out, so start thinking about 2013, any of you that are listening to this. So Chris, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It's always an honor.
Yeah, and today I want to dig a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, into the topics behind your newest book, the $100 Startup. I don't know if you can see that there. First, tell us about the book, and then I want to dive into this formula that you have for creating a successful startup.
Yeah, sure. So this book came about when I was actually on my first book tour. I saw you in San Francisco, and I went to 62 other cities. And at each stop, I would always meet interesting people, and I heard all kinds of interesting stories. And I heard stories of people who were what I called unconventional entrepreneurs or unexpected entrepreneurs. They weren't usually professional bloggers. They weren't necessarily like people who had a lot of online profile. They were just people from all walks of life who had somehow started a business, based off of something they were passionate about. Some of them had been fired or laid off from a traditional job and had to find a way to provide for their family. So a lot of stories kind of began like that, but they kind of turned, inspirational as these people found a way to, create freedom for themselves by making something valuable. So I was just personally inspired by a lot of these stories, and I wanted to find a way to kind of capture them all and tell them, and not just tell the stories, but hopefully also provide a blueprint, that other people could follow. There's a lot of books and resources that are kind of like, just go for it. And I think that's great. But a lot of people are ready to go for it. But they don't know what to do. Like, they're like, okay, I'm ready. What's the next step? And so the whole goal of the book is to say, okay, here's, 300 pages of next steps, based on the stories of all these people who've gone before, very specific, along with their mistakes, along with how much money they made, how much it cost to start the business, and all that kind of stuff. So that's how it came about.
That's something I like about this book, and I think it's something sort of, more telling about this movement in general, which I think you call micro-entrepreneurship in the book. But the movement, I think, if you think about everybody, there have been a lot of blogs that sort of talk about this idea of rah, let's change the world and start a business and travel and that sort of stuff, which is great, but I feel like everyone is ready to move on. It's like the sentiment is there, but how do we actually accomplish these things? How do we actually build a business based on something that we're interested in? And so you have a formula in the book, which is basically that a passion or skill plus usefulness equals success. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about, that formula?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of the formula of convergence is what I call it. And so it's like you've got two different things going on. You've got your passion and your skill, over here, and then you've got like everything that other people are interested in over here. And so what a lot of people miss, they focus so much on the passion part. They're like, I'm really passionate about this. They forget to create something useful or valuable. And so what everybody did in this book, all these stories that I talked to, they found a way to kind of find the overlapping part between their passion and something that was useful and valuable. So I say, like, the example I use is like, there's lots of things I'm passionate about. I used to be a very passionate video game player. I don't know if you ever played games, Corbett, but I was a dedicated Halo player. But nobody ever came along and gave me money for it, no matter how excited I was, about it. And then the same is true in some of the other things I do, like traveling to every country in the world. It's cool, it's fun, and some people like to read the blog about it, but no one's going to pay me, to do that. So I had to find a way in my own business to create value, to do something that's genuinely useful. And that's pretty much what everyone has to do, in their business. And so it's kind of a reality check there, but it's not meant to be discouraging. It's meant to be encouraging and empowering and saying, you can do something that you're passionate about, but you just got to figure out, how can you transfer that passion into something that's marketable, into something that's, valued by the marketplace, into something that people are willing to be like, okay, here's my money, connect me in this way. How can we facilitate an exchange?
We asked people at Think Traffic recently what the most tired or cliched advice was online, and do what you're passionate about was probably the top thing. And I think people just feel burned by that advice a little bit, maybe because there's a missing component, and I think that's what you're trying to bring to it here. Yeah. But beyond that, even if we can dig a little deeper, if you don't mind, beyond having a passion or a skill and, some demand in the market, something that people are interested in. Let's say that you have something that seems like sort of a fairly mundane idea, the sort of thing that's kind of run of the mill. In fact, you have a lot of examples in the book. How many examples are in the book, by the way?
We started with 1,500 people from all over the world, and we narrowed it down eventually to 70 case studies that are in the book.
Okay, awesome. So as part of the 70 case studies, you have people who are doing things that seem fairly normal, photographers and things like that. And what I want to get at is what separates a normal idea from one that takes off, like wildfire. So, and how do you turn a normal idea, let's say you want to be a dog walker, or you want to start a blog about fitness, you want to be a wedding photographer. What's the secret sauce that gets your passion and skill? Let's say you have that skill, you know how to do this thing, and there's definitely market demand there, but there's also competition. There's also people already doing this thing. How do you turn that into, a tinderbox of ideas?
Sure. So I think this whole thing about having a business idea is really interesting. A lot of people think they have a business idea, but they really just have like a general idea. The idea is like, I want to do something, I want to have the fitness blog, I want to be a photographer, but that's not really a business idea. So I would say, the secret sauce, the only secret sauce is passion and value together, creating something that's useful and helping people. But as to how that's done, the sooner you can convert your general idea to a specific offer, the better. And I think this is what people struggle with. They don't go from idea to specific implementation soon enough. And so, what I say is like, okay, to have a business, you need a product or a service. You need a group of people willing to buy it, and then a means of getting paid. So a lot of people, when they have the business idea, they don't have the product or service, right? So the sooner you can get to the actual, like, what am I actually offering? What am I actually doing? And as you mentioned, there's a lot of stories, in the book and elsewhere that seem kind of random and they're kind of funny, but they ended up like making a lot of money. There's a guy, Gary Leff in Virginia, who he has a full-time job and he's happy in his job. But he's always been really passionate about travel, kind of like me. And he's this expert about frequent flyer miles. And so he started this side business helping people book award trips, basically using their miles. So this is something that anyone can do for free on their own, if they know how to do it and want to put in the time or whatever. But he charges $250 for this service, and he has customers every day. He's making more than $100,000 a year helping people, book their frequent flyer miles. So, again, he had the passion, and he connected it to something that was useful, but then he actually turned it into an offer and said, okay, here's my offer. If you're trying to put together this trip and you've got some miles, you don't know what to do, you can go to this website. His website looks terrible, by the way, which is kind of interesting. Like you look at the website, you're like, Corbett Barr did not design this website. So the whole point is it doesn't matter. Like he's got this bad website, but interesting service, offer, way to get paid, and then he started it pretty quickly. He started it within a couple of weeks. So you reduce the risk by starting earlier, right? You reduce the risk by like, okay, let's just put it out there and see, what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. What about someone, let's say you were interested in teaching Spanish? Maybe it's something that you're good at. Maybe it's something you've done in the past, working for someone else, and you want to branch out and go on your own. Should you just say, hey, my name's Chris, I'm a Spanish teacher? Or is there some way to, make a splash or to make your chances of succeeding greater than everybody else's who's also trying to be a Spanish teacher?
Sure. Well, I mean, the more interesting it can be, the better. I mean, the more you can create a story and an event out of it, the better. I mean, that's what Benny Lewis has done. He's also in the book, and he's the professional language hacker. He calls himself by traveling around the world learning languages. And some people would describe him and say he gets paid to learn languages, but this is a really critical point. He actually doesn't get paid for that at all. That's something that he's passionate about, but he only gets paid by, creating a skill, creating something that's useful. And so he created the language hacking guide, which sells every day. And I don't know the current numbers, but I'm pretty sure it's at least a $50,000 a year project, if not more. There was also a snowboarding guy, similar story, a guy who was a snowboarding instructor in Canada. And, he had clients or students. He was doing okay. He was a good teacher, but it's a limited market there. It's seasonal. There's other instructors, all these things that you mentioned about competition. So what he did was he created a series of snowboarding DVDs, and basically built a business around this. He had no idea like how to make a business. He wasn't like a blogger or anything like that. But that's now a $300,000 a year business. So again, passion, skill, usefulness, creating an offer, figuring out how to make it interesting, tell a story, like Benny has done very well. And then after a while, it just becomes a process of continuous improvement. After a while, it's a process of, okay, I've got something out there. The sooner you get that first sale, the better. That first sale is really empowering. Like you get a sale, you're like, wow, I made $10, and you're so excited. Because that shows you then you can make $100 or $1,000 or whatever and scale. And so then after a while, it's a question of tweaks.
It's a really great point that you have about people waiting too long to actually complete the loop, the business loop, which is, you have something, you have an audience, and then you have an offer, which is basically a way for people to give you money. There's so many people that start businesses that just, for some reason, don't complete that last step, and they wonder why they don't have a business, right. and they're struggling with things that aren't really problems, like trying to grow an audience when maybe they already have enough people who are interested that actually would do something. This is something that comes up over and over again with bloggers that I know who have maybe been at it for 18 months or 2 years, and they have just for some reason really struggled with getting their first offer out there. And when they do, they're usually actually fairly surprised at the sales that they can make from doing something, and they kick themselves for not having gotten something out there earlier.
Yeah, and even if they make just a few sales, it's great. It's very empowering to do so. I talked to this guy who sold his first photography print for $50, and he talked about how the significance of that event, meant so much more, than the $50, because then it gave him confidence, to do other things. So I like what you said about closing the business loop, especially when we talk about creative people, like a lot of designers, anyone who does consulting, a lot of people have these websites. You go to their websites, they look really nice, but there's no way to give them money, It's like there's no PayPal button. There's no here's my service or here's my offer. Complete that loop.
How much of this do you think is maybe people just talking themselves out of actually producing something because of maybe the fear of failure? They're afraid that they'll put something out there and nobody will buy it. I mean, what's the psychology behind this? Do you think that prevents people from closing that loop?
Yeah, I think you hit on it there. I think certainly the internal obstacles are greater than the external obstacles, especially in this day and age. In this day and age, pretty much every tool that we want is available for free or low cost. We can learn to do things pretty quickly. We can get the message out there. We can figure out how to accept money. I mean, those things are all very easy. I do think we kind of tell ourselves, narratives of failure. I think we have various fears. Maybe we're also waiting for someone to kind of give their approval and be like, yes, now it's time. Now it's ready. You've been blogging for X months. Therefore, you should now launch a product. But really, no one has to do that. You have to just decide for yourself, okay, I'm going to try it. And the whole point of the micro business model is if it doesn't work out, okay, that's fine. I mean, have you ever had a business idea that you pursued that didn't work out? Right? I hear these statistics about number of businesses that fail in America or whatever. It's these 1/3 of businesses or 2/3. I don't even know what it is. And these statistics are always so gloomy. It's basically giving you the message don't take responsibility for yourself. And I always think it's so silly because I'm like, well, I've started lots of things that haven't worked out, but it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure as an entrepreneur. It means maybe I started something and it wasn't good, and I went on to something else.
Right. Even if the statistics are 9 out of 10 businesses fail, well, that's me. You know what I mean? I probably have tried 10 things and 9 of them failed.
And you kept going, and so here you are. Doing what you love to do.
Right, exactly. So if we could, can we end with some action steps? I'd love to leave people, if they're listening to this and they're bought into the idea. It's pretty easy to buy into this idea, right? Okay, I get to do something I love. I make decent money. I have freedom. I can actually make an impact on the world. It all sounds incredible. How do I start looking for that idea for myself? How do I figure out what that idea is? And how do I know if it's worth the year's worth of effort that I'm going to put into it, before I know whether or not it's going to be successful?
Okay, great. Well, first of all, read Think Traffic. Second of all, don't put a year's worth of effort into it. I would say, probably one of the main things that I talk about is the skills you already have are what you need. It doesn't mean you don't need any skills. It means you have skills, right? And so I always encourage people, so we talked about passion earlier. Let's talk about skills for a moment. Some people think they have no skills or they have no marketable skills. But often what you have to do is go through this process of skill transformation. And the whole principle is if you're good at something, you're probably good at something else. You're probably good at other things that are related. And so if you're a teacher, you might be good at teaching, but you're also a good communicator in general. You're good at crowd control. You're good at discipline. You're good at lesson planning. You got a short period of time. So you can do all these different things. There was someone in the book who was a waitress, and she was a very good waitress, and she got compliments and tips a lot, and she was good at upselling. And so someone said to her, "You would be really good at PR," and she didn't even know what PR stood for. But she ended up starting her own public relations firm out of that. So I would say, first of all, think about skills. Think about these things we've talked about in terms of offers. Spend some time thinking about what people want. And one of the principles that I talk about both in the book and just on the blog in general are sometimes what people say they want and what they really want are different. So it's really important to kind of delve into that and think about it in different aspects. Ultimately, what most of us want is to be happy. We want happiness in different forms, and we want like good things added to our lives and negative things taken away. So whatever kind of offer you can construct that does that in some way, if you're adding some kind of happiness or aspirational thing or something that improves someone's life or makes someone's life better, that's great. If you're taking away something that's stressful or helping people take control of their finances and get control over debt, then that's also positive. I just encourage people to go through this brainstorming process like that and, get feedback from people. But, as you said earlier, the sooner they can put something out, then the better.
Yeah. And it's something that I've learned from you also over the years is, and I'm sure that you spend a lot of time thinking about different projects and things, but I think everybody could use maybe a little more doing and a little less thinking, along the way. It does take a ton of hustle to make a business work, and you just have to be sort of prepared for that amount of work that you're going to have to put in.
Yeah, but hopefully you're doing something you like to do. And what's the alternative, If you don't want to put the work in, you could have a traditional job and be happy in it, and that's fine. But don't you have to work there? You have to work somewhere. You might as well work on what you want.
Right, or maybe you sit there and play on Facebook all day or something. So it's.
I suppose, yeah, but is that the life you really want? Right.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. The book is The $100 Startup. It is available now as of the airing of this interview, I believe, and I'll put a link below. Everybody check it out. There's some really great case studies in here. In fact, if you're sort of wondering what your gem of a business idea is, if you read through this, the 70 different case studies that are in here might sort of jostle your brain and give you some other ideas. So, Chris, thanks so much for being on.
Hey, thanks, Corbett. I appreciate it.
All right, talk to you soon.
Take care.